Untitled Legislature in Guam is back from recess. We resume with the second reading file. We are now on Bill number 300-36 LS. Senator Perez, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to place Bill 300-36 LS as amended by the Committee on Environment, Revenue and Taxation, Labor Procurement, Statistics Research and Planning into the third reading file, and I wish to discuss.
Please proceed.
Bill 300-36 was created in response to the concerns in Veto Bill 236-36. The concern in the veto message was that should 3 positive quotes not be obtained, the language of maximum extent practicable was unclear if that would prohibit the use of small purchases. In the previous legislature, this same language was added to the emergency procurement bill to address that very concern. To address this particular concern, Bill 300-36 incorporated language to include, quote, in the event that an agency obtains less than 3 positive quotations and provides the attestation required by this section, the agency may proceed with the small purchase procurement, close quote. Additionally, a new section was added to require the Policy Office to promulgate accompanying rules and regulations within the 90 calendar days after enactment. My office worked closely with the administration, and I appreciate the assistance from the administration in drafting this with suitable language. The intent of Bill 300-36 remains the same as previous Bill 236-36, which is to increase accountability and transparency in the procurement of small purchases by the government of Guam. Small purchase procurement method allows for practicality for agencies to move quickly on supplies, services, construction, meeting the requirement monetary threshold. Current statute sets small purchase thresholds at $25,000 for supplies and services and $100,000 for construction. It requires that procurement shall not be artificially divided in order to not exceed these thresholds, and that the Chief Procurement Officer, Director of Department of Public Works, and the head of a purchasing agency send monthly reports to the legislature regarding small purchases exceeding $15,000 for supplies and services and those exceeding $50,000 for construction. Current regulations do not require the level of transparency for other methods of procurement, so no requirement for advertisement that can signal a prospective qualified contractor to submit quotes, thus decreasing the competitive pool and not fostering the effective competition and obtaining the best value for government. In 2004, the OPA reported several findings regarding small purchases during a 21-month period from October 1st, 2001 to June 30th, 2003. Small purchases accounted for 95% out of the 10,000 purchase orders valued at $25 million. Evidence indicated at the time that multiple purchases were possibly artificially divided to pose as small purchases in an attempt to circumvent procurement regulations by not obtaining 3 telephonic or written quotations for purchases of $500 or less, or obtaining competitive sealed bids for purchases above $15,000. In effect, over time, such practices resulted in larger purchases that should have required competitive sealed bidding. And evidence was also found at the time of possible preferential selection of vendors, with the top 20 vendors receiving $4.9 million in FY 2002 alone. So in 2020, the Office of Public Accountability's press release highlighted that only 3 government agencies submitted monthly reports regarding small purchases to the legislature as required by law. And since the 2003 audit, the current influx of federal pandemic relief money warrants greater transparency and attention on practices of small purchases, with the intention of fostering competition through positive quotations, ensuring that small purchases are not artificially subdivided to meet the threshold limits, and in those cases, require the use of competitive bidding for larger purchases in order to ultimately obtain the best value in the expenditure of vital public funds. So Bill 300-36 aims to reform current statute by increasing transparency and accountability in the following manner. In addition to requiring the 3 positive quotes from qualified sources, it requires the following documentation: whether or not a small purchase solicitation was concluded or not. The documentation would include all businesses that were contacted, their responses, whether positive or not, or a non-response. A statement from the agency that documenting their efforts to obtain quotations of the usual qualified sources, as well as a GSA list of all qualified vendors for items or services procured. Additionally, quarterly reporting of the use of small purchases by all agencies are required. During the public hearing, testimony was provided that small purchases were most likely used for recurring purchases, and therefore indefinite quantity bids should be used to foster competition and transparency. Additionally, there was recommendation for the use of blanket purchase rules and regulations could be emulated in developing the rules and regs for small purchases. I look forward to and thank my colleagues in advance for their support to update our procurement laws and the protection of our public trust. Situas Masi.
Situas Masi, Senator. On Bill number 300-36 as amended, is there anyone who'd like to be recognized? Senator Taitagui, you are recognized.
Situas Masi, Madam Speaker, and thank you so much. I stand in full support of this legislation, and you know, it's ironic, Madam Speaker, we were talking with Chris Barnett the other day, and he was talking about how procurement is such an unsexy subject, but I don't think he realizes how important procurement and the process is in government. It could delay, you know, many purchases that are needed in our government right away. It can span from having protests. It's just something that's very intricate, something that needs to be well thought out. And I think that this legislation does just that. And I just hope that the administration, or Mr. Burns himself, promised that he would get this list of vendors that's greatly needed, a comment made by himself as well as Attorney Brown, to be put in place. Unfortunately, you know, it's going to take them about 6 months to do this list. But it's a list that I'm hoping they can put out much sooner, because we're going into a situation right now, Madam Speaker, with federal funds running out. And we have a deadline, I believe, of August 2022 for some of these huge amounts of federal funds coming our way. So it's so important to follow these guidelines and these rules and regulations, not to put a barrier, you know, provide more bureaucracy, to provide something that's fair within our government, so everyone has the opportunity. So I rise in full support of this legislation, and I did mention during the public hearing to ask to be a co-sponsor once again, as I was on the original bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. On Bill number 300-36 LS, is there anyone who'd like to be recognized? Senator Brown, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I also rise in support of this bill that our colleague, Senator Sabina Flores, has put forth. Certainly, she is the sponsor, as Senator Tello, you know, elaborated on the significance and importance of this. And it's unfortunate we have to address this issue, but it's a reality. It's a reality in our government. You know, we want to make sure that our people have some confidence in the process under which our government is procuring items. And you'd like to think that if it's a smaller amount, if it's under $10,000, $15,000, that's not really significant. But for most people, $15,000 is a lot of money. Not everyone even has that in their bank account. And when you see, thank you. And when you see abuses in our government, unfortunately, that's a reality. That we have to put these requirements in place to try and minimize as much as possible individuals that are involved in procurement, not necessarily even them. Sometimes it might be their bosses or their higher-ups that kind of direct how purchases take place. And it's unfortunate also because you end up having a lot of private businesses that do not want to do business with the government of Guam because it's not sometimes a clean process. And evidence as time goes on continues to show. I mean, we've seen those abuses with regards to sole source procurement. We've seen those abuses with regards to emergency procurement. It just happens to be convenient. The people that are affiliated with the powers that be just seem to be the ones that end up getting these contracts and not go through the full proper process of ensuring that there's open announcement and that the essential game plan for everyone involved is the same. And so anything we can do to strengthen that process and reduce the amount of abuse of public funds and public resources by all means is a good thing. So I certainly support this bill and also would like to ask the sponsor if I could also be a co-sponsor as I was with the other legislation. With that, Madam Speaker, thank you for the opportunity to rise in support of this bill.
Thank you, Senator. On the bill, 300-36 LS. Anyone would like to be recognized? Senator Blas, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, first off, I'd like just to thank the author of this legislation for putting out this legislation. That said, and I appreciate the presentation she provided in the introduction of the bill onto the floor and some of the observations or some of the things that she had stated, and probably why this bill is not just important but is timely in the procurement practices, or the practices of procurement that have been occurring over the last few years, more specifically over the last 2 years, where appears to be, and there may be obvious attempts to be able to circumvent the system so that we can keep things within certain procurement parameters, the guidelines, but then also just outright and blatantly ignoring the procurement guidelines and the laws set on procurement. And it's kind of disturbing because while we continue to be in a state of emergency, there are still certain guidelines, there's still certain statutes that have to be abided by in the performance of procurement. And I was taking particular interest to some of the presentation that the author had provided, in that while this bill attempts to be able to close the loophole, shorten the gap in some of these areas of our procurement statutes, so that these things can no longer continue to occur. My concern is it's occurring. Okay, and this bill doesn't, as with most of our bills, it's not retrospective, not retroactive, but one can only imagine what we may find, what Pandora's box is going to be open, and what violations, for lack of a better term, will we find if we were to do that. So, while I stand in support of this bill, I also stand in appreciation and the recognition that there's more to be done with regards to the procurement, most especially over the last 2 years. It really stabs to the heart of what we as a body is responsible for in handling the purse strings of the government. And, basically, since March of 2020, this body has been handcuffed and has been restricted in many of its responsibilities and duties. So I hope that in strengthening this law, or the current statutes with regard to procurement, that if it were to ever continue to happen, that there is law that has to be abided by. And I want to thank the author again for that. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. On the bill, 300. Anyone else like to be recognized?
Speaker Therese Chalayi, you are acknowledged on the bill.
I want to echo the comments of the previous speakers. I support the bill as well, and I think it's timely, necessary. There have been so many efforts over many, many years to reform procurement. And I want to commend the sponsor of this bill for her fortitude in those efforts, during her term in the Guam Legislature, or her terms, it's not an easy thing to do. As one person said, it's not sexy. It is technical. It's, yet, if we're going to get value for the government, and we're going to get the best value for the government so that we can use our resources wisely and as best as possible and spread them to as many needs as possible, we need our procurement system to be exactly what this bill is trying to make it be. That is, to increase competition, to ensure that no one can game the system, that we don't have multiple small purchases which evade, the transparency of regular purchases, and so that we can get the best value by increasing that competition. And I think the process that the author has put in place also makes it very efficient for the people at GSA who are doing the procurement for us and throughout the government. And it also, one of my favorite parts about it is that it's going to create or mandate that a list be created. And by the way, this bill is very responsive to audit findings as to small purchases. And so I want to commend the author for that as well, that this bill responds to those audit findings, the leaks, in other words, and fixes those leaks. And so my favorite part of the bill is that it requires that a list of all qualified vendors for the items or services that are being procured will be made by GSA. It will be public. It's going to be part of every procurement record. In other words, now they can call up 3 vendors and try to get quotes from 3 different vendors. This bill is going to require them first to create a list of all the vendors for that particular item and have that list available so when they need it, they're not picking and choosing, but they're using that entire list. They are soliciting, and that they are trying their best to get 3 quotes and then choose, of course, from the best of the 3 quotes. So many times it has happened that, there aren't 3 quotes because they pick 2 vendors that are kind of not active and 1 that's active. And we end up with 1 quote, things like that. And so, again, I just commend, I fully support the bill. And I commend the author for the hard work that it takes to really reform procurement. And this is, this is one of several bills to reform procurement. And I remember working with senators who had massive bills to reform the entire procurement law, and they were just so complex, and they couldn't get consensus, so they didn't move, despite all the work that had been put into them over many, many years, in fact. And so I think that during this term, we have really seen these efforts pay off, particularly by the sponsor, and that we have seen these bills, these procurement reforms take place part by part. So I stand in support of the bill. Sidusmasi.
Thank you, Speaker Chirla. Is there anyone else on the main motion? Speaker?
On Bill 300-36, Vice Speaker, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I too, Madam Speaker, want to rise in support of 300-36 as introduced by Senator Paris. And I'd like to thank her also for not giving up as it relates, and as I agree with the sentiments that you spoke about, Madam Speaker, I maybe like to put in the why on this legislation, and it's to put on public record attempts of a purchasing agency to solicit purchases competitively. And the intent for 300-36 is really to safeguard the competitive process by requiring a purchasing agency of the government to provide proof that they solicited written quotations from businesses for small purchases. And Madam Speaker, as I share the sentiments of all the retiring speakers who spoke about this legislation, yes, you are right. In the past, there have been legislations to try and literally overhaul the procurement process, and it's not an easy task. But definitely, as the oversight continues to look at measures that really need to be updated, this is that step. So I rise in full support, and I want to thank the good author, literally, for not giving up, and thank her for her efforts. So I rise in support of this bill, 300-36 LS. Sana Masi.
Sana Masi. On Bill 300-36 LS, is there anyone else who'd like to be recognized? If not, then the sponsor may close.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm deeply humbled by the support of my colleagues and seeing that this is a legislative priority to ensure that the expenditures of public funds are done in the public interest and public trust, to improve public trust. I do want to give special thanks, and also I would like to make an amendment to the bill to add co-sponsors, and I just want to also highlight their efforts too in collaborating and making this bill better. So all of you had a hand in this. So I want to add Speaker Therese Terlahi as a co-sponsor, Senator Tello Taitigui. I also want to thank Vice Speaker Tina Rose Munoz-Barnes as a co-sponsor for making this process happen. So is Masi. Senator Joanne Brown, Senator Frank Blas Jr., and if there's no objections, all my colleagues.
The motion, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. On the motion to place on third reading, Senator Paris?
So I'd like to make the motion to place Bill 300-36 LS into the third reading file.
Is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. We're now on resolution number 290-36 COR. Senator Anthony Atta, you are recognized.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Speaker. I'd like to make a motion to place resolution number 290-36 COR, introduced by myself, Senator Frank Blas Jr., Christopher M. Duenas, Joe S. San Augustine, Jose Pedro Terlahi, Teresa M. Terlahi, Tello T. Taitigui, Amanda L. Shelton, Tina Rose Munoz-Barnes, James C. Moylan, Sabina Flores Perez, Joanne Brown, Clinton E. Rigel. And this is relative to expressing the support of the 36 in the legislature in Guam for the passage of H.R. 3512, the Health Care for Our Troops Act, which would provide access to zero-cost TRICARE, Reserve, Select, and dental coverage to Reserve Component service members. To the third reading, I'd like to speak on the motion, please.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Resolution 290-36 expresses the support of the 36 in the legislature in Guam for H.R. 3512, currently before the U.S. House of Representatives. H.R. 3512, if enacted, would provide medical and dental care to selected reserve service members at no out-of-pocket cost. Its passage would provide guardsmen and reservists medical coverage on par with their active duty component counterparts. Currently, there are approximately 130,000 selected reservists who don't have private health insurance. Here on Guam, we have approximately 2,679 reservists, both Army Reserve and National Guards individuals. On the Air Guard, we have 400. Army Guard, 1,080. Air Force Reserve, 252. Army Reserve, 667. Navy Reserve, 200. And Coast Guard Reserve, 80. The current law provides coverage to part-time guardsmen only when they are federally mobilized for more than 30 days. Most domestic missions are of shorter duration, and many are conducted under state active duty, which provides no health care under any circumstances. This bill, H.R. 3512, addresses 2 additional TRICARE parity issues for the reserve component. It provides National Guard and Reserve retirees who receive early retirement pay due to deployment credits the same TRICARE benefits as all other military retirees. It also accelerates the fix for reserve component members who are federal employees by eliminating the statutory language that excludes federal employees' health benefit programs eligible service members from TRICARE Reserve Select eligibility. Madam Speaker, we rely on our guardsmen and our reservists in times of need. Our guardsmen and reservists work and train to maintain a constant state of readiness. Medical readiness is a vital component that must be supported, and I urge our body's support for H.R. 3512 via Resolution 290-36. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. On resolution number 290-36 COR, would anyone like to be recognized? Vice Speaker, you are recognized.
Promise, Madam Speaker, I'll make this short. I just want to thank the good author of this resolution 290-36 CR for giving me the opportunity to be a part of this co-sponsorship and supporting this efforts for House Resolution 3512 for the Healthcare of Our Troops Act. I think it's a long time coming, especially for our military guardsmen and airmen within our island of Guam. No secret that Guam continues to be the highest per capita in enlisted military forces for both active duty and reserve duty and guard duty. And, you know, it's always difficult when they have to pick up and go and having to worry about if they're going to be covered or not. Too many times where they'll say that, okay, you're going to go on, get deployed or whatever, but based on the timing or where their deployment's going to be, that sometimes it doesn't even get covered. And it just depends on what's on their, whether it be their PCS or any other documents that let these guardsmen or these military guardsmen or airmen go, right? So for me, this is really a positive thing. Also want to acknowledge that the sponsor quoted that there was more than 2,679 military personnel in Guam. I literally thought it was higher than that, but I just want to say, even based on the numbers as provided in this resolution, the number continues to be very high. You don't ever have to worry about someone joining the military military family here on our island. People used to do a lot of advertisements and everything. Here on Guam, our young generation continues to step up to the plate to want to serve and protect our island and our country. So in that effort, I really hope this resolution gets passed in Congress. I do want to note that this is a strong message saying that we support our military personnel, and we know that this is a good House Resolution 3512 moving forward. So I want to say for the record, I hope my colleagues all support it. We did have 12 members, Madam Speaker, get on the sponsorship, and I know the other 2 were around during that time of circulation that they probably put their John Hancock on this. So I ask that all my colleagues be a part of this effort and ask them to support this measure. Untitled Masi and Sana Masi for letting me speak. Thank you.
You're welcome. On the resolution number 290-36 COR, would anyone like to be recognized? Senator Perez, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of this resolution. During the public hearing, there was a statistics that was provided by my colleague, Senator Nelson. She said that 16% of active guardsmen and women have no health care. And I think it's really a shame because, you know, the military has one of the largest budgets. It is the largest budget. Over $700 billion goes to the military. And I think, you know, it's the least that we can do to protect those that are serving, to ensure that they're taken care of. And I just want to express my support of this resolution. I do hope that in Congress it passes as well. So it's Tuas Masi.
Situus Masi. On resolution number 290-36, would anyone like to be recognized? If not, then the sponsor may close.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to make an amendment to add co-sponsors Mayor Camacho Torres and Telena Cruz Nelson to the resolution as well, please.
On that motion, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank my colleagues for their input on Resolution 290-36. Much of what we do as legislators is to ensure that we take into account issues of equity and parity in the crafting of legislation. The provisions of law must not leave any resident behind. Our guardsmen and reservists often put their lives on the line when called upon, yet many cannot avail of the benefits that active duty personnel are provided. H.R. 3512 will rectify this, and I hope that this body will voice its support for its passage by voting for Resolution 290-36. Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I ask that we move it down to the third reading.
On that motion to place resolution number 290-36 COR in the third reading, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. We are now on resolution number 315-36 LS. Senator Shelton, you are recognized.
Situus Masi, Madam Speaker, I move to place resolution number 315-36 in the third reading, and I wish to speak on it. On behalf of the author, Majority Leader Telena Cruz Nelson.
Please proceed.
Situus Masi, Madam Speaker, resolution number 315-36 is relative to expressing the utmost support of Imina 36 na Legislature in Guam for the passage of H.R. 6675, the Independent Va Audit Act, which seeks to direct the Secretary of Veterans Affairs to seek to enter into an agreement with a non-governmental entity to conduct an audit of the healthcare system of the Department of Veteran Affairs. The Independent VA Audit Act was introduced by Congressman Paul Gosar on February 9, 2022, which seeks to direct the Secretary of Veterans Affairs to hire again a non-governmental entity to conduct an audit of the Department of Veterans Affairs healthcare system. The third-party auditor will provide increased transparency and use a thorough plan to address delays and backlog veterans experience in obtaining proper healthcare services. If enacted, H.R. 6675 would greatly benefit our island's veterans and the Guam Veterans Affairs Office by improving the overall Veterans Affairs healthcare system. The audit would also address the disabling healthcare issues with delays and backlogs of available appointments for veterans to receive hospital care and medical services within the community-based outpatient clinics, which we know as the CBOC. The Independent VA Audit Act would also alleviate potential barriers to their earned benefits and services. Resolution number 315-36 expresses the support from this body of the passage of H.R. 6675. that will ensure transparency and provide a better plan to combat issues within our veterans' healthcare system. I thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to speak on this resolution, and I ask our colleagues for their support.
Thank you, Senator. On resolution number 315-36LS, is there anyone that'd like to be recognized? Senator San Augustine, you are recognized.
Madam Speaker, I rise in support of this resolution. My colleagues, we just heard the previous resolution talks about the Reserve and the National Guard. If you're not aware, majority of our folks that are in the National Guard and the Army Reserve on Guam are veterans. So this audit would help them get the service that they have rightfully earned. And with the passage of this resolution in Congress and the passage of that other resolution that we've supported earlier, it'll take care of our veterans on Guam. May it be a National Guard veteran, Army Reserve veteran, or any type of veteran on Guam. They've all earned. And I rise in full support of this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. On the resolution number 315-36LS, is there anyone else who'd like to be recognized? Senator Atta, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise in full support of Resolution 315-36. It just goes to show that we want to do what we can to ensure that the health care needs of our veterans are being taken care of. And I believe that this audit will show that what we lack here on Guam for veteran care services will come up and show that we are far behind what the national average is. You know that when our veterans go to the CBOC unit up at Naval Hospital, the appointment system that they go through, the medications, ordering of their medications, all these things, they need to come back and ensure that what is going on is first and foremost beneficial to our veterans. And if this audit comes out and shows that we are behind, hopefully that they'll fix the system and ensure that we come up to parity with our national veterans clinics and CBOC units out there as well. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. On resolution number 315-36LS, is there anyone else who'd like to be recognized? If not, then the sponsor may close on behalf of Senator Nelson.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I thank our colleagues for their support of this resolution and, of course, in support of our island's veterans. I move to add all members of the body as co-sponsors of resolution number 315-36.
On that motion, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries.
Thank you, and I move to place resolution number 315-36 in the voting file.
On that motion to place resolution number 315-36LS as amended by the author and further amended on the floor to the voting file, to the third reading, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. We're now on bill number 281-36 COR. However, that requires a committee of the whole. Can you say that on the record, Senator?
Yes, Madam Speaker. If we're going to proceed on to Bill 281-36, and we would be required to go to committee of the whole, that we would recess today until Tuesday at 10 o'clock in the morning and begin with the committee of the whole on Bill 281.
There's one more bill on our agenda that I think.
Okay.
Maybe
Okay, then.
If we could pass on file, or, set aside, Bill 281.
We'll
now.
just, whatever the call of the body is. As long as we understand, we got to go committee of the whole, and whatever day we're going to do it, need better notice than just now. Thank you.
Yes, Senator. I could get a motion to set aside Bill 281-36 COR, and we can proceed with Bill 242. On that motion, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. So we are now on Bill 242-36 LS. Senator Torres, you are recognized.
Jesus Mossi, Madam Speaker, I move to place Bill number 242-36 LS as amended by the Committee on Health, Land, Justice, and Culture, introduced by myself and co-sponsored by Speaker Teresa M. Terlahi, Vice Speaker Tina Rose Munya-Barnes, and Senators Amanda L. Shelton, James C. Moylan, Jose Pedro Terlahi, V. Anthony Adov, Frank Blas Jr., Clinton E. Rangel, Joe S. San Augustin, and Christopher M. Duenas into the third reading file. This is an act to add a new Article 2 to Chapter 40, Title 7, Guam Code Annotated, and to further add a new Section 30.400 to Chapter 30 of Title 9, Guam Code Annotated, relative to the transfer or release of family violence, sexual assault, and stalking victims from shared wireless plans. And I wish to speak on the measure further.
Please proceed.
Thank you. Bill 242 shines a light on a hidden risk for victims of intimate partner violence. While mobile phones have become an indispensable part of many of our lives, they are also the #1 technology used by abusers to harass, track, or control their victims. This is often manifested in the shared phone plan, which can unintentionally trap victims to their joint contract with their abuser. Although stalking software can simply be deleted from your device, shared plans are notoriously challenging to get out of. Generally, individuals cannot separate their phone numbers or be released from a shared plan without the account owner's permission. This task can be difficult or dangerous for a victim when the primary account holder is an abusive partner, a vengeful ex-partner, or a perpetrator of family violence. The account holder may also use the shared account to access the victim's call records, harvest their text messages, or cut off all communications. Bill 242 would free victims without compromising their ability to stay connected to their loved ones. It does this by allowing victims to separate their phone from any shared plan involving an abuser without fees or penalty. Under this bill, the opt-out request must be submitted in writing along with a valid police report, an order of protection, or a statement from a licensed medical or mental health care provider, a court employee, social worker, or victim advocate. This measure also authorizes the court to issue an order to transfer or release the victim from a shared wireless plan. As you're well aware, Madam Speaker, Bill 242 received unanimous support from victim advocates at the public hearing, including the Office of the Attorney General and the Bureau of Women's Affairs, the former Assistant Attorney General of the Family and Sex Crimes Unit, Ms. Christine Tenorio, the Guam Youth Congress, and the University of Guam's Social Work Student Alliance. Many of these participants offered meaningful recommendations to further strengthen the bill. And as a result, my office worked with your committee, Madam Speaker, on Justice, to make the following changes to Bill 242. And I'll run by the four changes that were made to this bill by your committee. First, and in line with my statement at the public hearing, Bill 242 as amended makes clear that a criminal conviction is not required for the purposes of requesting release or transfer from a shared wireless plan. A victim must only present evidence to the wireless provider as specified in one of the sections, Section 30.400C. The second amendment expands the transfer or release from shared wireless plans to include other victims, not just victims of family violence. As you're aware, this change was made following discussions between my office and Attorney Christine Tenorio. Given that Guam's current family violence laws do not adequately capture victims of emotionally abusive or coercive partners, victims of stalking were added to the bill. And while there are very few spousal rape cases in Guam, Attorney Tenorio recommended that we also include victims of sexual assault to cover all gaps in the law in the event that a case does arise in which it is necessary to have. Third, the amended bill authorizes a victim's attorney or victim advocate to submit the out-op request to service providers along with any required documentation. And this change was made at the request of the, and recommendation of the Office of the Attorney General. The fourth point is, which was also at the AG's recommendation, Bill 242 as amended replaces the signed affidavit requirement with instead a declaration made under penalty of perjury. This would achieve the same purpose as a signed affidavit without additional barriers such as the notary requirement, which can be tedious. Madam Speaker, I thank each one of our advocates for their thoughtful efforts towards this bill and to your committee for implementing these changes that were suggested at the public hearing. I also want to reiterate my awareness of the phone companies who already go out of their way to assist our victims. The Guam Safe Housing Act, which I authored last term, similarly acknowledged those landlords who were already doing what they could to help tenants in need. But our laws shouldn't take a chance on those that don't. And given our troubling rate of domestic violence and sexual assault, Bill 242 makes clear that no contract is sacred enough to continue abuse. In doing so, we assure survivors that they can cut ties with their abuser, they can start over, and with bills such as this Bill 242-36, they may begin to feel safe again. Situus Masi.
Situus Masi, Senator. On Bill 242-36 LS, is there anyone who would like to be recognized? Senator Blas, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I stand in full support of this piece of legislation, and I would be remiss and, but actually very quite proud that, the attorney that we speak of is my daughter. And that in her passion, because of the experience that she has had in working and trying criminal sexual conduct cases on the island and working with your committee and working with colleagues here, and not just in this legislature, but in past, that we address statutes that, first off, have been antiquated because they've been in the books for so long, and maybe statutes where, because of technology and because of the advancement, not just in law, but elsewhere, we may see as necessities. Granted, we wouldn't even think about having to deal with this kind of law 50 years ago. You just say 50 years ago, my daughter wasn't even around. But now, because of technology and because of the ease and convenience that people may have, and may cause some grief and some concern with these victims, that we need to continue to stay ahead, step ahead of a lot of this technology and advancement, and address these areas where they can, they can cause it, or may have an opportunity to cause more harm. I want to thank the author of this legislation for being able to work collaboratively and bring about this legislation, and also thank her for the opportunity that I have in being able to be a co-sponsor to this legislation. So I thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to speak on this. And again, I'd like to ask also my colleagues for their full support for this piece of legislation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. Is there anyone else who would like to be recognized on resolution number 315-36 LS? If If not, then the sponsor may close.
Madam Speaker, to the retiring speaker, I want to also commend and extend my Sidus Masi to his family member for not only her advocacy in dealing with victims of sexual abuse, but in her diligence in lending her expertise to us. And to Madam Speaker, my sincere gratitude also for your committee's attention to Bill 242, 243, and 244, which I think are very important at this point in our history in Guam. And also, these sorts of measures really highlight the best of what this legislature can do in terms of the collaboration that we've had and the outpouring of support and effort in amending and enhancing bills through the Office of the Attorney General, the Bureau of Women's Affairs, attorneys of interest such as Attorney Tenorio, the Guam Youth Congress, and also the University of Guam Social Work Student Alliance, who I understand are also students of yours, Speaker. So it is that kind of collaboration I think that this island needs as we continue to feel the ravages of crimes against our most vulnerable in the community. And so with that, I thank everybody for their efforts. I'd also like to move to add Senator Talina Nelson as a co-sponsor to this bill.
On that motion, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, that motion passes.
And I move, Madam Speaker, that this bill be placed on the third reading voting file.
On the motion to place Bill number 242-36LS as amended by the committee and further amended on the floor to the third reading file, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries.
Sidus Masi.
So we're back now. We have one remaining item on second reading, which is Bill 281-36 COR. This includes an appropriation to the Guam Election Commission. We will need to resolve into the Committee of the Whole when we come back. So I'm going to recess until Tuesday at 10:30 a.m. If the Sergeant of Arms and the committee chair could help us to get the people for the Committee of the Whole for that day. So we will resume session at 10:30 a.m. Tuesday, May 3rd, to Dismasi. Recess.